everyone. I am going live today with my friend and unbelievably talented speech language pathologist, singing teacher, voice specialist, Sarah K. Brown. How are you?
Good, thanks. It's so nice to see you.
So nice to see you too. And I kind of are so on the same page that we can just like get talking. But I thought, they kind of cover, they're all over the place, but all vocal health wise. And so if you want, I was like, let's
just roll through
let's
the
just jump
questions.
in.
That sounds
and I
great.
was gonna say anybody too, and I think people have, and thanks everybody for joining and watching, but oh, well, this one says, my vocal lady got a beautiful smile. That's not really a question, but we're both vocal ladies, so I say we both take it as a compliment. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks our orthodontists.
Yes. Amen, Sister
Yes.
Okay, so the first one says, and I think these are great just because they're all good, because like I said, they're all over the place, and they're going to be things that so many people have these same questions. You hear them all the time. I hear them all the time. So I'm thrilled for you to hear them. So the first one's kind of a two-parter.
Okay.
It says, I feel like when I sing much at all, my throat gets scratchy feeling, and I kind of feel like I need to cough. So their question is, number one, kind of what does that mean? They're a little worried about it. And two, what can I do for it? And they specifically said, I try honey and lemon, and that doesn't help. And they asked, somebody had told them, eat raw ginger. And so I know that's kind of like a three-parter, but I thought, let me let you take that. And so I guess the first part is, if you're singing and you feel like, it feels scratchy and kind of like you need to cough or clear your throat. That's kind of number one.
That's number one. That unfortunately is a sign that something is not going quite right while you are singing. It's usually a sign that there's too much pressure or too much force in the way that the singing voice is being produced. And that could be a lot of things. It could be that the tongue is really tight. It could be that the breath and the voice are not syncing up the way that they should be. It could be that the registers are not balanced the way that would feel comfortable. And so that could be a lot of reasons that there would feel like too much pressure and too much effort involved in singing. And so that usually is a sign that it's time to maybe work with someone one-on-one potentially and get some professional guidance on how to balance your voice. And that most of the time will help resolve those kinds of symptoms. Now, it might be worth getting a vocal cord check done just in case. I think sometimes when there's that kind of symptom happening with singing, if that's available to you, it can be nice to just make sure that the vocal cords look clean, they look healthy, that there's nothing else at play, because certainly things like allergies or potentially an underlying vocal injury could also contribute to those symptoms. So on the safe side, I'd probably also recommend a vocal cord check, but it sounds mostly like it's maybe time to work with someone one-on-one for some professional guidance on technique. And I've certainly been there myself with, working on my singing voice many years ago, and having symptoms afterward and being like, that doesn't feel right. And it can be frustrating, but I think it's so worth the time and energy, if you love to sing, to really get some guidance from someone who knows the anatomy and physiology and how to help you improve the function.
Yeah. Well, that was a fantastic answer.
Thanks.
And when you say potentially get a vocal cord check, you're talking about, just to point out to people who wouldn't know otherwise, it's not an ENT.
Thank you.
It's not the way to go. It's a trained laryngologist, if you want to speak just a tad more to that.
Yeah, that would be the ideal. Now, that may not be locally accessible to every single person, but if it's possible to see a laryngologist who has done fellowship training specifically in voice and laryngology, that provider is going to be more advanced in their clinical diagnosis. They're going to have more advanced equipment. They have more advanced surgical skills. And so you'll overall get probably a better care and better experience and better understanding of what's going on if you see a laryngologist. There are a number of ENTs who can also take a look at your vocal folds, but often they may not have the most fancy equipment. And one of those things is called stroboscopy, which is a strobe light in the camera, and that's how we actually see the vocal folds vibrate. So if they don't have that additional piece of the strobe light unit, we won't be able to see how your vocal folds vibrate, which is a really big missing piece of how you diagnose what's going on. So that's just one example of an equipment thing that's different or
Yep.
can be different. So even if you can't see a laryngologist, at the very least, if you're going to an ENT, call and ask and see if they have stroboscopy or the strobe light for your vocal folds.
Yes. Well, and
Yeah.
someone just commented, Sarah Kay's voice is so soothing and
Oh,
just beautiful.
that's so nice.
It's true though. You
That's very
really
sweet.
should. You have such a, and again, from a voice dork like myself, it's not just that it's soothing, but it just sounds so efficient and resonant. You need to do one of those like, the fall asleep apps online.
Oh,
And now we are counting.
I should
Your book.
definitely look into that.
You
That's really
should. Your
funny.
voice would be perfect. Well, and
Thanks.
then the follow up to this, and this is great just because so many singers talk about this. Again, I know you hear this
Yeah.
all the time, so I feel positive anybody who's watching this now or is going to watch this probably has the same question, but they said, well, what can I do for that? Obviously, you mentioned it's probably something more technique based
Yeah.
and balancing that voice or working with
Totally.
someone. Exactly. Tracy, the coach, which, hi, he's great. He said it sounds healthy.
Oh, thank you.
Um, uh, all of that is ideal, but what they have been doing is the old, which is, what I was told back in the day. I bet you
Yeah.
too. Just have some honey or some lemon. And they asked about, well, what could I eat or
Right.
drink that's going to take care of it? So,
Right.
again, can you answer that? Can you?
Yes, for sure. That
Yes.
I get that a lot too with
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's definitely a common thing said, I think, in the voice world. And unfortunately, there's not really a quick fix when you're having a voice problem. Even when you're sick, there's not usually a quick fix to make things better, especially if something is more technique oriented and that's creating the symptoms. Nothing you eat or drink is going to affect the way that you're using those muscles. Now, things like honey and lemon and tea, they can feel soothing to the tissues of your throat, but when you eat and drink, nothing actually touches your vocal cords. If you
Mm-hmm.
did, or if it did, that would mean you're choking, and that
Yeah.
would mean that things are literally going down into your trachea and into your lungs. And so the idea that eating and drinking certain things will directly do something to your voice, for the most part, is not true. That's not to say you can't have honey in your tea or you can't have lemon in your tea, and if that feels nice to you, by all means, like enjoy that. Just know that it's not like a magic wand for your voice. It's not going to be a magic quick fix. I think in general, the more simple things are usually the best. So, for example, drinking water because that hydrates your whole body and then
Mm-hmm.
systemically hydrates your vocal folds. That goes a long way. It's just being adequately hydrated. Being well rested goes a long way. Making sure you're not overusing your voice in terms of quantity goes a long way. And so I always recommend getting those variables in place first. And then if there's additional things that you feel like, oh yeah, when I, use this ginger lozenge, it feels nice, okay, great. But let's get
Yeah.
the simple stuff in place first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a reason why voice professionals beat the drum of drink
Yeah.
water, get good sleep, don't overload your voice because those things are just so key
Yeah.
to just your most optimal function. And yes, somebody said if it, just like what you said, if the liquid did hit your vocal folds, you would choke. I always say it's that
Right.
feeling of when people say, oh no, it went down the wrong pipe.
Right.
That's the pipe where the vocal folds
Right.
are. Yes.
Exactly, exactly. So
Yep.
that would actually be a problem if it was going down the wrong pipe. And so
Yes.
the one way that you can, theoretically more directly moisturize your vocal folds would be to steam, or to
Mm-hmm.
sit there and breathe in steam for a few minutes. So if you are feeling a little vocally tired, if you are feeling phlegmier as the weather is changing and all those kinds of things, steaming would be one way to feel more moisture more directly on your vocal folds. But other than that, there's really not um, another way to directly to
Yeah.
directly moisturize them.
Do you have a preference? Are you more nebulizer than steamer? Because the nebulizer has those smaller particles that can actually go to the fold level, or there some people are
That's
and
such a
other
great
people love
question.
steaming. Yeah. Do you have
Yeah,
a just that's kind of personal preference probably
no,
too, right?
totally. And you know what? It's funny. I see that Michelle has joined the call and she's so lovely. She is a speech pathologist based in Australia and she actually has a really great post on her Instagram a little ways back, but it's on the research on nebulizers and steaming and comparing. And I don't recall all of the specific findings that she found in her lit review, but it sounded like they were kind of pros to both. And
Yep.
funnily enough for me, which is a little bit embarrassing, my quick and dirty way of doing this that feels like it's helpful, even though it may not actually be touching my vocal folds, I just like to drink really hot water. I get my water really hot and steaming, and I drink that and I kind of breathe in a little bit. And
Yep.
for me, on the go, when I'm at work, we happen to have one of those hot water machines. That's
Yep.
the quickest way for me to feel like, okay, that does actually feel like it's doing something. I have no research to tell you for sure if it is or not, but it actually does feel soothing to me and it's really fast.
Yeah.
So it works for my lifestyle.
I'm in your camp too, because even though I know like when people say, well, will this tea with honey and lemon take care of my vocal fold issue? And I'm like, well, they don't actually, it doesn't actually hit your vocal folds. But
Yeah.
that being said, if I'm going to go, especially if I've been teaching all day, and then let's say I'm going to
Hmm.
go sing in a recording session, I have a tumbler of warm, steamy
Yeah,
tea with me the entire time, and
totally.
it makes me feel better. Whether that is exactly like what you said, whether it's mental or it's just kind of soothing and warming to the body, so I kind of relax, whatever it is.
Whatever it is.
That's why I'm like, if it works for you, it's not going to harm anything
No, for
whatsoever.
sure.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm pro tea, but
Yeah.
that's if you're feeling like you constantly have an issue here, it's not just that you need tea.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Often it is, I think, technique and that mechanical muscle part of it tends to be more what's going on when there's
Yep.
kind of that chronic, I use my voice and then it's a problem. That probably means how you're using your voice is the problem.
It's a problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this was an interesting one. This one says, are perfumes
Hmm.
or room scents bad for the voice?
Not that I'm aware of. No, I haven't read anything that's an issue. I mean, technically, when you do inhale anything, if you're smelling it or if you're breathing through your mouth, it will pass your vocal folds. There are some aromas or aromatic things, like if you were to suck on a menthol lozenge or to breathe in a lot of eucalyptus, that is thought to be drying to the vocal folds.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, perfumes, I'm not aware of them causing any dryness or any symptoms. Now, there are people who have hypersensitive larynxes who, if they breathe in perfumes or breathe in strong smells or chemicals, it sends them into a coughing fit or a lot of throat clearing. And
Yep.
that is going to be really traumatic to the vocal folds if you're coughing and clearing all the time. So that could potentially be an issue if you find that smelling things makes you cough and clear. But
Mm-hmm.
other than eucalyptus and menthol and kind of breathing those things in very intentionally, I'm not aware of anything that's particularly drying to the vocal folds.
Yes. One person said perfumes or make me cough like crazy, so I use roll-ons, and I
Mm,
think that's kind of already, and I know you and I have, of course, have talked about this before. It's sort of that recurring theme then of we will find in just in the voice field in general. There's the larger general statements like water is going to be
hmm.
good for everybody,
Yes,
and then so much of it is going to come down to the individual. If you feel like
totally.
warm water does nothing for you, don't have it. If you
Right.
feel like it's helpful, rock on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So same thing kind of with the strong smells.
Yeah, but I thought that was interesting because I just thought like I haven't had it. Is perfume bad for my voice? But I,
Yeah.
I I would bet that's somebody who exactly like what you said. They probably are a little hypersensitive. Um, and yeah, if you cough all the time, like one of the person commented, then I think roll on or all that seems like a smart way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Someone said, have you ever tried black seed oil?
I have not.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I haven't.
Me either.
I
I don't
thought
just.
so. I don't know.
Okay. The next one says, so this goes a little bit kind of to the first one, but this is a singer that said, I lose my voice really easily.
Mm,
So even if I'm out at a restaurant for a few hours with
hmm.
friends speaking, the
Yeah.
next day I'm hoarse.
Okay.
Um, what can I do?
Definitely time to get a vocal cord check done, for sure. That would be step number one. There's very likely lots of different things that can be done to help you. So, no matter what that check shows, it's certainly not like a death sentence for your voice or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I think it's time to get them looked at to see if is it just I'm straining a lot and then I get tired the next day, or is it that is there something there that's more like an injury, or is there anything like a vocal fold weakness going on causing me to strain more? There's so many things it could be, and there's so many things that can be done to help, both behaviorally and also surgically. So I would try to get in with a laryngologist if you can. Extra points if they work with a speech pathologist and they do a joint evaluation.
Yep.
But definitely time to do that. And very likely it sounds like potentially voice therapy may or may not be in your future, depending on what they find.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and so a couple comments. One is, how can I take care of my voice as a teenager?
Mm-hmm.
My voice seems to really vary from day to day. And I
Hmm.
bet, but if you can comment and let us know what age of a teenager you are, I bet that impacts, could have some impact as well on theirs. But I digress because you are the pro here, Sarah. What would you say for a teenager that feels like
Yeah.
just their voice varies from day to day?
So this one kind of applies to humans of all ages, but I think the most important thing to start jotting down is what are the patterns? Is it worse on days that you use your voice more, or does that not matter? Is it worse on days that you don't sleep as much or don't drink as much water? Is it worse if you've eaten spicy foods or really acidic foods? And just taking note of what are the patterns. Are certain seasons of the year worse than others? Once you
Mm.
can track the patterns, that helps to find the cause. But if you can't identify any pattern with it, it does make it harder to figure out what exactly is going on. But that would be the first thing I would do. And I think when you're a teen, often your schedule is so busy. You're going to school, and then you have homework, and maybe you have choir rehearsal or musical rehearsal or sports practice. There's a lot in your day that could be the reason that it's variable. So I would really think about what are my activities on the days that, my voice is more variable and all that kind of thing. And that will help to sort of narrow down what's going on. One other thing to think about too, I see that you said you're 13, almost 14.
Oh, good. You saw that. I
And
was going to say
yeah, and
that's what I wondered when they first said
yeah,
that.
regardless of gender, I know we kind of typically think about men going through puberty in their, kind of early teens and having that really big voice change. But women also go through a voice change too with puberty. So sometimes at that, between 12 to 14 mark, there may be some hormonal things going on that are causing more vocal instability, and your voice may have not fully settled in yet too. So that is something I would think about at that age in particular.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I'm glad. I wasn't sure, Sarah, if you could see all the comments. So I'm so
Oh,
glad that
yeah,
you
I
can.
can
So
see.
I love
I've
this
seen
one.
some of them.
Yeah, Dirk, who's just the nicest ever. He's always so kind and supportive and reshares and
Oh,
but I
nice.
love this because he's asking about air conditioning and you just
Yes.
had a great
Oh,
hilarious video about this.
video about that. Well,
So
I
yes,
told,
can you speak about, yeah, he just said, well, he heard
yeah,
Aretha didn't like AC or in the
yeah,
room or a
in the
cold
room.
room. Yeah.
Yeah, so technically air conditioning can be drying, especially if you're a mouth breather in general. You're going to be sort of drying out your voice overnight. And then if you have the AC on top of that, it's sort of just blowing cold air all night. Now, for me personally, I have to sleep with it cold or else I won't sleep. And to me, sleep is better than the dryness. I can kind of offset the dryness the next day, but I can't offset the sleep. So
I'm the same. Yeah.
I personally sleep with a lot of air conditioning and then just try to manage the dryness the next day. But that is the main effect, is that you'll feel kind of dry. So one option is to just make sure the air conditioner is not pointing directly at your face. So some people sleep with it directly on them. If you can just make it have the room cold but not be blowing on you all night, that can help. You could also potentially run a humidifier too
I was
to
going to
see if
ask
that sort
about
of
that.
offsets it. Humidifiers are tricky because you have to be really diligent about cleaning them. So that's why for my lifestyle, steaming or drinking my really, really hot water is easier for my lifestyle because I don't have to worry about cleaning the humidifier every single week. You do have to be very diligent about that if you're going to use a humidifier.
Yes, well, and it's funny that you say that because I'm hugely pro humidifier and I have
Yeah.
3 kids and especially, when it gets cold and we start turning the heat on, I'm a humidifier in every single room lady.
Yeah.
And then I also am I hate cleaning them lady.
Yes.
So it's not a really great combo, because it gets to a point, and this is awful, but just where I'm like,
Yeah.
forget it. It needs cleaned so badly. And I like, when am I going to do that? That we're just like, well, no humidity in the room. You know?
Yeah.
So I'm the
Well,
same.
yeah.
I'm like, stand in the shower, kiddos. Get that.
Yep.
Get that. Yes.
Get that moisture.
Get that moisture that way. Yes. I have chronic rhinitis. Any
Mm.
tips?
Yeah, that, you know what? I do have some tips, but I will say a joke that my laryngology colleague always says is that if he had a cure for chronic rhinitis, he wouldn't be working. He'd be on an island somewhere living it up because he'd be rich. Because there unfortunately isn't really a cure for chronic rhinitis. It's sort of how do you best manage it? I think the classic traditional like saline nasal sprays and nasal rinses, plus or minus any other type of nasal spray, potentially Flonase, maybe something prescribed by your doctor, all of those kinds of nasal managements are good, and they have been shown to work. They may not be a perfect solution, but they should at least help some to keep it at bay. In general, staying super hydrated can just feel like you're keeping your mucus very thin. Doing the steaming. I see you do the humidifier already, which is really good. And I think one of the other big things, I know for myself, this was a hard switch I had to make because I am a very just allergic person, is even though I have phlegm and I do a post-nasal drip and I swallow it and I can feel it even coming into my mouth, it's gross. I swallow it. I don't clear it. I don't constantly go throughout the day because that just dries you out more, which then makes you produce more mucus and feel even phlegmier. So it is learning to sort of manage it as best you can and then desensitize to the feeling of phlegm in your system. And it can be done. I've done it. We've stayed pretty good about it. And I work with a lot of patients on sort of desensitizing to the little bit of phlegm that you may be feeling after all the nasal management things. That's the thing that will help keep your voice healthy, is if you make sure you're not coughing and clearing it off your vocal folds.
Well, you had no clue. We did not go through these beforehand. And obviously that was one right off the cuff. But
Oh.
the next one was, what's another option for me? And sorry, I have somehow a little gnat in my studio.
Oh, you're good.
So when people see me, like, you're not watching me lose it. I have like a little gnat that just keeps getting right in my face. They actually asked, what's another option for me? Instead of clearing my throat or coughing, because they had heard from following me a video in the past saying that's really can be detrimental to the voice. And it's also this
Totally.
vicious cycle, like you said. As
For
soon as
sure.
we do this, our body says, oh, shoot more mucus up there to help protect. So
For sure.
yes, what
Yeah.
option would you say instead of clearing the throat?
Yeah. So there's a number of them. The simplest one would just be to take a sip of water and to swallow and to kind of swallow firmly. Give it a nice squeeze when you swallow and then relax afterwards. That would be my first step. If you need to really interrupt this cycle, doing Sorry, I lost you for a second. I
Oh,
think we're
you did?
back.
Are we back? Oh,
Yeah, we're back.
okay, good.
So the sniff opens the vocal folds and helps keep them apart so that you don't cough, and then you can sip and swallow hard. Some other ones would be to use your voice in an easy way. You can say to try to clear off the cords just by gently vibrating your vocal folds together. You could trill, you could gargle water with your voice on if you're maybe not in public, I don't know. And worst case scenario, you can do a very, very baby throat clear that's basically silent. I would say this very much as your last resort, like you just really feel like I've done everything I can and I am about to talk in this meeting and I just have to clear my voice. That's all you get. It's that much. And that's it. Nothing more aggressive than that, nothing stronger than that. Just a tiny baby clear and then drink some water and see if that does the trick. Because anything more than that is quite traumatic to the vocal folds.
And that's kind of like that. I was going to ask you about I had always been told the unvoiced throat clear, like just that's kind of the even babier version of that, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying. Can you show me what?
Well, I actually don't do it because what I do is I do like a little semi-occluded, like you said, just like a little mini slide. It is so
Mm-hmm.
habitual now, just because I've
Yeah.
been a singer and teaching singer for so long. I always use this analogy, which most people don't get because, gosh, this is an old movie from the 80s. Did you ever watch The Dark Crystal? Or if anybody in here
No.
is an 80s movie watcher, if you watch The Dark Crystal, there's this character. Um, he's named Chamberlain, and he always goes,
Oh, I love that.
yeah. Well, and the funny thing is, I am that person. I'll be like out, at the grocery store with my uh, kids, and I'll kind of feel like I need to clear my throat, and I just go, I mean,
That's
which it
amazing.
takes care of it, and then I drink water. But
Yeah.
oh, good, yes, but yeah,
Yeah.
a couple people were like, I know that freaky movie.
Okay,
I
good.
love that freaky movie, yes. But and my kids now, like they used to just be like, oh my gosh, but now they just know I make my little kind of like you said, a trill. I just do like a little
Yeah.
baby siren or slide, and a lot of
Hmm.
times it's enough vibration, or it could
Hmm.
also be part of it could just be mentally. I feel like I shook it off,
Yeah.
and I'm okay from there. But whatever it is, it generally feels like it takes care of the issue.
Yeah, for sure. So all of that, sipping water, vocalizing, all of that's the first line of action for sure. And
Yeah.
if you do clear your throat, it's saving it just for those emergency
Yes.
situations.
Well, and I know we're already, so I have two more. Are you good
Oh yeah, I'm
on?
good on time.
Okay,
Yeah.
good time, Sarah, because I know it's the end of the day, and already, like I said, I could just keep talking, and then we'll be like, hey, it's time to go put my kids to bed. So the two left. One of them I first wanted to jump into. So I personally, and there's some fellow voice pros and coaches on here that are wonderful, and I know they're going to feel the same way, and I feel fairly certain you will too. I know I'm really queuing this up. But I had a singer who reached out, and they are just a beautiful, lovely opera singer. They also do a pop gig for like a 3 hour pop gig once a week. They sound
Awesome.
lovely on that too. They've done this combination for well over a decade, and have no issues whatsoever. But they have been lately told by a lot of their colleagues, oh, they're so sweet. They're like, it's like 2:30 in the morning here. Some of the people commenting, thank you guys
It's
so
so
much for
nice you're
watching.
watching.
I know, so sweet. But they have been a little nervous lately because even though they've never had issues and they both sound great and feel great, their colleagues have been telling them, fellow opera colleagues,
Ah,
that commercial singing will ruin their voice, and specifically said, which I hadn't heard this one before. I mean, I hear the
hmm.
contemporary singing will ruin your voice all the time, and I just, I
Yeah,
have my personal feelings on
yeah.
that. But they were told that if they sing pop music, it will harm the connection of their vocal folds for opera.
No.
I know, exactly.
I mean, that's my
That's what I
advice.
said.
Just
Well, my
no,
first response was, I was like, if you've been doing it for
yeah,
however many years, 20 years, 15, 20 years,
yeah,
exactly, yeah,
like
but it's
no.
up, yeah. I was like, then
Yeah,
obviously you know that, and I just said,
yeah,
obviously anybody who says that to you is clearly, I should point out when I say it drives me batty, they're clearly well intentioned.
yeah,
They just
yeah,
are
yeah.
incredibly misinformed.
Oh, completely. And it's,
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, if you are singing in multiple styles and you spend, several weeks only stretching the resonance shapes and the register choices for one style, and then you all of a sudden try to flip back to the other style, but you haven't been
Mhm.
working both for the last several weeks, yeah, those switches are going to feel clunky and weird and not necessarily comfortable. But as long as you are remaining flexible in your instrument and you are sort of working on both and keeping that flexibility there between across styles and cross genres, I don't see any issue with that at all. And if anything, I actually think for the most part, training across genres usually makes for stronger singers. Ironically,
Amen.
yeah, I was the opera major in college who listened to the people who said, don't belt and don't use your chest voice and don't sing a cappella or pop outside of, class. And I listened, and I actually didn't do any of that. And I was the one who had all the technical problems at the end of my college career because my chest voice was so, or however you want to describe that register, speaking register, was
you're
so
like the foundation
underdeveloped.
for your,
And I had a huge problem with my register balancing that caused me to switch careers and go to speech pathology.
yeah.
So it actually was learning how to belt or how to strengthen that speaking register and take it up higher in my range and have more choices and flexibility that actually saved my opera voice. So I do feel very passionately about that in particular. Yeah, I just don't think that's true. But I do think if you've worked one for a long time and haven't worked the other, you will feel clunky switching. So you just have to keep those switches fresh.
Yes. Well, amen. I knew your response would be the same as mine, but I responded to them, but I said, you know what? I am talking with Sarah, who's a speech language pathologist, and I'm going to ask her. So I'm pretty sure she's going to reiterate the same feelings, but let's get her perspective. So wonderful. And so the other question I had was from, and I got a couple of these from people who were wondering about recovering your voice or ideal things to do after being sick. One of them specifically had been dealing with COVID. So a lot of, and they're on the mend, but a lot of really heavy coughing, and kind of the question of, do I do complete vocal rest? So I thought, this is kind of a time where we've been dealing with this. I'm sure you have patients galore who've had to deal with that, singers who've had to deal with it. So I thought it'd be a good way to kind of round things out, as for anybody who's dealt with that, is dealing with that, or not, just how the best way to recover that voice after you've had no choice but to it's seen some real trauma.
Yeah, that's really it's not a straightforward answer, and I actually do think post-COVID issues are a little bit different than just the average post-cold issue. So that one is tricky. I have seen a lot of post-COVID chronic cough, and that can be managed. And so I would definitely recommend getting set up with a laryngologist and a speech pathologist. Often those chronic coughers end up in my office to work on breaking the cough, because if it's just a dry, kind of tickly cough that's sort of post-viral or post-COVID, it usually doesn't need to happen. It usually falls under that hypersensitive cough category. And so working with a speech pathologist to get that under control would be paramount to you being able to return to doing any sort of athletic voice use, because if you're coughing all the time, you're basically just wearing out your voice to no end. So would definitely recommend looking into getting set up with a care team and seeing if that applies to you specifically for the chronic cough. I think for the average cold, it's really based on the individual. It depends on how far your voice was gone when you had the cold. If you only were a little snotty and maybe just had mild voice changes, it might not take you very long to come back, and you might not have to do a ton of vocal rest. For me, a couple years ago, I had a really nasty cold that took out my voice. I was almost aphonic. It took me about a month before I felt like you're good. That was your emergency one. It's your emergency.
Right after I was like, oh, I don't clear my throat.
I love it.
I really genuinely, generally don't. But yes, I was going to be like, oh, girl, I'm so sorry. And yes, that's how emotional I was.
But yeah, it was, it took me about a month to where my speaking voice was back and I could sing. It just took me about a month before it felt like I could sing the way that I had been singing and not have issues. So I think really critically thinking about that as you're going through the recovery process of, even if you're back to somewhat regular voice use, you may not feel full functioning for about a month. It doesn't mean you can't use your voice. It just means you have to be mindful of that. And, all of those variables we've talked about, you have to do them to the extreme. You would be hopefully doing them anyways before you got sick, but the hydration, the sleep, very regular warming up. SOVTs can be extremely helpful in the recovery period. You may be doing a lot more straw phonation or cup bubbling or lip trills gently than you would need to do if you weren't recovering from being sick. I think just even bumping that kind of gentle voice use up even more can also be really helpful. But I think it's really just knowing it's an individual process and being mindful of that and being kind to yourself if things aren't fully back to where they were right away. That can be normal.
Well, and that I was going to ask if you could give examples of gentle SOVT, semi-occluded vocal tract exercises for those folks that don't know, but then
Yeah.
you jumped right into them. So
Oh.
singing with the straw into water, lip trills,
Hmm.
uh, humming, all of those types of things.
Hmm.
I had the same thing. This was several years ago, close to 10 years ago now, but I
Yeah.
actually got pneumonia.
Oh God.
And I will say that for my, and probably I am hyper aware of my
Yeah.
voice, and I'm sure that you are too. So just
Hmm.
somebody else might say like it's 100%, but I'm like, I am telling you it's not.
Totally not.
Yes, it is not 100%. And I finally, exactly what you I really, it was 6 weeks later and it still was not 100%.
Yeah.
And I assumed, pneumonia is rough, but I went and made an appointment, had a
Yeah.
stroboscopy, had the vocal folds looked at, and they said, no, Amber, everything's fine. Because I just thought like, I don't know, I was coughing really hard
Yeah. We wanted to
and,
make
and could
sure.
and couldn't help it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All was healthy. But yeah, it's scary. And it really
Yeah.
took me, just like what you said, going overboard on all those things I already know,
Totally.
and giving it time. And I think you said something, just because you've been so wonderful at the end of the day to give so much time, and everybody's commenting about
Oh, that's so
how
nice.
great and helpful this is.
Thanks.
And yes, I am a vocal coach. Somebody just asked that. So
Oh,
yes,
good. I'm glad that we
yes.
can confirm. That's good.
Vocal coach, voice teacher. Yes, absolutely. And I'm a big, I'm not a speech language pathologist, but certainly vocal health,
Yeah.
and vocal health training and voice habilitation is something I'm very passionate about. Oh, thank you, Candace. But you mentioned something before, just when you were talking about getting over illness, that I just think is key to
Mm.
voice use, period. When you said it's up, we've said it before, it really comes down to the individual. Be mindful of how things feel, be mindful of how much you're using your voice, and be kind to yourself. And I
Yes.
think really, if we think about as singers, one size does not fit all, which I realize I say that all the time, but and you and I are both on here, as well as some of the folks that are watching, giving tips, but those are general
Yeah.
tips. Listen to your body, and give yourself grace, and try to just become aware of,
Oh, totally.
mindfulness is huge, I think.
Oh, completely. I think the sign to me of a mature singer, and they could be young, they could be old, but the sign of like maturity as a singer is that more developed awareness of, I'm noticing these patterns, and when I do this with my voice, or when I eat these certain things, or have this certain thing happening in my life, my voice changes, and that awareness of that versus, oh, I noticed when I do the trills and I adjust this slightly, it actually feels better than this way. I'm like, oh, okay, good. There's that kind of
Yeah.
independence and maturity developing in the singer where
Yep.
I will personally always probably have a singing teacher because I think that helps me, keep accountable and keep moving and keep progressing
Amen.
forwards.
Yep.
But I also think it's really valuable to be able to sort of coach yourself a little bit, and I try to get my patients and the students that I see for singing to feel like they have some independence in their tools and ability to be aware and mindful of what they're doing and to try adjustments on their own to see if they help
Yep.
and to see if they work. Because I know for me, there have been times that I have figured something out myself that no one else has been able to tell me. And it was because I sat there and really, really,
Yes.
really tried to just be aware of my own instrument.
Yeah, and the tools, that's what I always say, about my own teaching and the singers that I work with, is ideally the job is not to just give you exercises and say do them, but equip you with a better understanding of your instrument. So when there's an
Yeah,
issue, you can start to scan and correct. And I think that's really
exactly.
empowering too.
Oh, totally. I think it takes a lot of the fear out of voice. I think
100%.
a lot of times there's fear of the unknown, there's fear of not feeling in control of your instrument and feeling like it's controlling you. And, you know, there should be freedom in singing, and at a certain point you do have to let go. But I think when you have the tools to kind of control your voice and manipulate it just how you want to, and sort of scan and check and do different things to get yourself feeling more set up on a variable day, I think people feel a lot more empowered and a lot less scared to go on stage.
Yep. Yeah. I always just love speaking with you, Sarah. So
Same. This is so
I
fun
know.
for me. You're like, oh, it's after work for you. And I'm like, please, this is so fun.
Well, it's so fun for me too, and I so appreciate it. And I also um, know how helpful it is, and like I said, how helpful the information that you're so wonderful about giving and sharing with everybody. And yeah, thank you so much for your time, and
Oh,
thanks
no
everybody for
worries.
watching. It's been a, if you look too, it's been a love fest the whole
Oh,
time.
yeah, that's really sweet. Thank you for everyone for joining. And I've seen a number of compliments and things that's just very sweet. So this has been really fun. Always happy to share and look forward to the next time we do this.
Yes, oh, me too. All right. Well, have a great night, Sarah, and
Thanks,
have
you
a great
too.
morning. And those people where it's 2:30, y'all go to bed.
You are
Go to
really
bed.
amazing,
Yes.
you people.
We love you, but get your Z's. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.